Ladies and gentlemen, I'll call to order the December 22nd, 2021 meeting of the 2021 Charter Commission. My name is Greg Musil and I'm the chair of the commission. I'll kind of walk through again why we're here and how we got here. Every 10 years, according to the Johnson County Home Rule Charter, a charter commission is appointed consisting of 25 members of the public, appointed by various groups throughout the county, including the Kansas House of Representatives delegation, the Kansas Senate delegation. Each of the county commissioners has an appointment. The county commission chair has 2 appointments. Each of the major political parties in the county gets 2 appointments. The chambers of commerce collectively get 2 appointments. There are 2 appointments from the unincorporated part of the county. And I'm probably missing some others, but it's a very diverse group of people appointing what I think is a very diverse group of 25 citizens who are all volunteers. We have been meeting since, I think our first meeting was in late March. We've been meeting at least twice a month since then. Our authority by statute is simply to decide whether or not an amendment will be placed on the ballot for the voters of Johnson County to vote up or down. So that if any amendment is proposed to the current home rule charter by this commission by a vote of at least, but has to have 13 yes votes, it would be on the ballot next November so that you, the voters, can vote on it, yes or no. We can also make what are purely recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners so that the Board of County Commissioners can consider those or not as to how we think there might be improvements in the governance structure of the county. We do not make any final decisions. We do not mandate anything except that a ballot question would be placed on the ballot for voting on next November 2022. We've gone through this process and had an early November deadline for members of the commission to propose amendments. I know I've seen some media reports and social media that the Board of County Commissioners have proposed amendments. All of the amendments that have been proposed that are on the website have been proposed by members of this commission, not by members of the Board of County Commissioners. We then considered each of those on a first reading, which allowed the sponsor of that amendment to discuss what the amendment meant, why they wanted it, why they thought it was a good idea. The next meeting after that, we took a vote to see if that proposal received 9 votes out of 25. If it received 9 votes, then it was moved on to a second reading, some of which we'll have today on 3 proposals. The second reading was an additional opportunity for the sponsor to present their proposal and to discuss it, and for the commission as a whole to ask questions and continue discussion on that. Under the rules we adopted in May or June, I don't remember the exact month. Once the second reading was completed, a vote would not be held until at least the next meeting, and in some cases here, the second meeting after the second reading was concluded. All of that was intended to make sure everybody had plenty of time to discuss the proposed amendment, to think about it, reflect on it, hear from people in the community before they voted. Tonight, we have 3 items that are on second reading, meaning they will be discussed tonight, but not voted on. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand we could have a few more people in the room under the fire marshal rules, so we will be letting a few more people in. Appreciate your being respectful and civil as you've been so far, so that we can have as many people observe personally as possible. Let's see. So I think I told you we have 5 items on the record tonight to vote on. They've already completed their second reading, and we have 3 items that will receive their second reading and then be voted on, presumably at our January 10th meeting, which is the next regularly scheduled meeting. I do want to address a couple things I've seen in the media and social media concerns about why this was held the week of Christmas and the notion that there was something covert or some subterfuge. We set our meeting schedule back in May to meet on the second Monday and the fourth Wednesday of every month. This is the fourth Wednesday of December, and this meeting has been scheduled since this late spring or early summer. We've had 3 meetings in December to try to complete our task because we have a statutory deadline of submitting a report to the Board of County Commissioners by late February. So the goal is to have everything voted on by January 10th so that we can then get a report prepared and approved by this commission and then submitted to the county commission. Are there any questions from anybody on the commission about that description? Did I miss anything or misstate anything? Again, I appreciate the 25 members of this board, many of whom are here today and some of whom are appearing virtually. I guess at that point, we will ask for roll call. Deputy Clerk Linda Sater will call the roll. Oh, excuse me, just a minute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Wendy Bingesser. Present. Mike Bain. Present. Karen Brownlee. Karen Brownlee, can you unmute yourself on your phone? I'll come back to her.
Present.
Thank you. Vicki Charlesworth.
Present.
Thank you. Present. Jim Denning.
Denning here.
Thank you. Present. Jane Dirks. Present. Jimmy Gaona. He will be absent for most of the meeting tonight. Tedrick Hausch.
Present.
Thank you. Present. Randy Hutchins.
Randy Hutchins here.
Thank you. Chris Iliff. Chris Iliff. Laura Clean Smith. Thank you. Joy Costin. Thank you. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune here.
Thank you. Eric Michelson. Thank you. Ed Peterson. Thank you. Don Rutan. Thank you. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts present.
Thank you. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell present.
Thank you. Paula Swacht. Thank you. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp present.
Thank you. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, present.
Thank you. Greg Smith.
Greg Smith here.
Thank you. Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas present.
Thank you. Chair Musel.
Here.
And has Chris Iliff arrived at the meeting? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
On Zoom.
Is he present, Aaron?
No, he is not on Zoom.
Thank you. 23 present.
23 out of 25 members are present, so we do have a quorum. I noticed a lot of you are videotaping this, which you're certainly welcome to do. I just want to, it's an opportunity to remind everybody that every meeting that we've had is available on videotape on the charter website, which is charter.jocogov.org. It includes the current home rule charter, all of the amendments that have been proposed, all of the agendas of every meeting we've had, and all of the minutes of every meeting we've had, including a YouTube video of every meeting. So if you want to go back and see what's happened over the last 19 meetings, I think this may be number 20, this is 19 or 20, you're certainly welcome to do so. The first item on the agenda is to consider approval of the December 22, 2021 agenda. I do want to note one change to the agenda as published with respect to the items that have been approved through second reading and were prepared for a vote tonight. One of those was the proposal to change the election of the sheriff from partisan to nonpartisan. I shared with each of you yesterday the legal opinion of the Fulton Siefken law firm that we retained based on our meeting on December 13th. That opinion is that under Kansas statutes, we do not have the authority as a charter commission to change the sheriff from partisan to nonpartisan. And based on that, thank you. I very much appreciate your enthusiasm. We'll get through this all faster if we just take it for what it's worth. We're not going to have a vote on the sheriff being partisan because the proponents of that have withdrawn that. So that is the only change to the agenda that I'm aware of. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I would move to approve as amended.
Moved by Commissioner McCune and seconded by Ms. Bingasser to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. The agenda is approved as amended. So we will have 4 votes tonight instead of 5. The next item is to consider the approval of the December 6th, 2021 minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of our December 6th meeting? And if you're on Zoom, please just interrupt because I don't have a screen to see who's raising their hand. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the December 6th meeting? Moved by Commissioner Costin and seconded by Commissioner Peterson. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. The December 6th minutes are approved without objection. The next item is to consider approval of the December 13th, 2021 minutes, our last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the December 13 minutes? Moved to approve by Commissioner Boehm and seconded by Commissioner Schwach. All those in favor say aye.
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 The December 13th minutes are approved without objection as well. There is no old business. We are ready for new business in the second reading. I do want to mention, I mentioned earlier that we have on December 13th, the commission authorized the engagement of a law firm to review several of the proposals to determine whether or not they are consistent with Kansas statutes and Kansas Constitution. If the commission chooses by 13 or more votes to place something on the ballot, then a licensed Kansas attorney must certify that it is not in conflict with Kansas existing statutes or the Constitution, which we cannot overrule. So we've engaged that law firm to provide us with legal opinions. They provided us with 3 thus far. We have 1 more coming. The first one was that we could not change the election of the sheriff from partisan to nonpartisan. So those are typically be considered attorney-client privilege communications. When you ask your lawyer for his or her opinion on something, that is a confidential opinion between you and your lawyer, and the client has the opportunity to waive that and disclose it to anybody else, in which case that communication becomes public. With respect to the Charter Commission, I had asked the commissioners yesterday when I forwarded the legal opinions whether anybody objected to making those opinions public, although they are technically between the lawyer and the Charter Commission. Obviously, they're part of a public discussion and will have an influence on how this commission approaches certain amendments. So without any objection from anybody, I intend to disclose those opinions as we go through each of the items tonight so that the public understands what our engaged counsel has told us they believe the state of Kansas law is. The other item I'll give everybody a heads up on, when we get to the voting, we have, as you probably noticed, we've been voting in alphabetical order. I've asked Deputy Clerk, what's your name again? Deputy Clerk Linda Sater, the brains of this operation, to, in a more random fashion, call for your vote. So be prepared as we get into the votes, the 4 votes that we have tonight, for your name to be called in something other than the normal order that you anticipated before. Again, we're ready for second reading on 3 items. The second reading does not lead to a vote until at least the January 10th meeting. It would be my intent that all these would be voted on January 10th, so we know for sure by then whether anything will be placed on the ballot next November. The three items that we have, so the public is aware and members of the commission know the order we're taking them in. Number one, Commissioner Hutchins has proposed that a trustee be elected for the unincorporated part of the county with certain powers and authority. We have a legal opinion on his original proposal, which again you saw yesterday, and we have a revised proposal that Randy is going to discuss today. We do not have a legal opinion on the revised proposal because it was not part of the original assignment to the law firm. The second item on second reading is Commissioner Michelson's proposal that the chair be elected to a 5-year term in November of 2022. And from then on, be in a 4-year term so that the chair of the county commission would be elected in an odd year instead of the same year as 3 of the county district commissioners. We do not have a legal opinion on that yet, but we have asked for one. The third one is Commissioner Schock's proposal that we add some language to the charter commission or the home rule charter to ensure that personnel regulations and other administrative policies adopted by the county, by the Board of County Commissioners, are also applicable to the district attorney and the sheriff's office, which are offices created by state statute. And we have a legal opinion on those that you saw yesterday. Again, those 3 items will not be voted on. I'm hoping that because this is second reading, we can limit the discussion and the presentation and discussions to about 10 minutes for the presentations and then no more than 10 minutes for the discussion. So we can get, since they've all been discussed at first reading, but I do not intend to cut anybody off. So Randy, everybody received Randy's revised proposal in your email, I think Monday night. So Randy, the floor is yours to discuss your revised proposal for an elected trustee. And yeah, Deputy Clerk Sater will read it so that everybody's aware of what it is.
Originally, establishment of Johnson County unincorporated trustee position elected by the unincorporated citizens of Johnson County. Submitted with new wording for above proposed amendment as of 12/20/2021. Amendment mandating that the Johnson County Planning and Zoning Commission, with the advice and consent of the township trustees, spend certain monies from the general fund, reserves, and public works funds of Johnson County, Kansas, on the maintenance and upkeep of roads, bridges, culverts, and overall capital improvement in the unincorporated areas of Johnson County, Kansas.
Okay, are we good to go? All right, fantastic. Well, thank you again for allowing me to present this amendment. Just if we could just go to the next slide. Very good. This was the original reading of the amendment that was put forth. It was establishment of the Johnson County unincorporated trustee position elected by the unincorporated citizens of Johnson County. And so just a refresh on what brought us to this what brought us to this point. As I did a more detailed presentation about the conditions of the infrastructure in Johnson County. We have many roads that are gravel roads, dilapidated infrastructure, bridges and culverts, overhanging limbs. In general, there's just been a neglect of the investment in the unincorporated area. And, obviously we tried to facilitate the process. And what we run into is only 2 of the 7 county commissioners actually have people in the unincorporated area as constituents in their region. So 2 of 7 obviously will not carry a vote, within the commission. Additionally, there's 40% of the total mass of Johnson County is in fact unincorporated. And there's been little to no capital investment being spent in the unincorporated area. Additionally, we're seeking on the commissions that are making rules and regulations specific to the unincorporated area. We want to ensure those, in fact, commissions are being filled by positions and people of the unincorporated area. And so when I presented this to you last time, I was very open and honest that I wasn't sure if the elected trustee was the best approach. And I asked the commission to provide feedback on that to see if there was a better way in which we could approach it. And I apologize for not being able to have enough time to reach out to all the members of the commission. Some of you proactively reached out to me and I proactively reached out to you, but I just didn't have enough time to touch base with everyone. So my apologies in advance for that. But I got some excellent feedback. Feedback that I took to heart and then started reaching out to additional people to try to figure out how do we put together an optimal model that in your minds would be the best model for the members of Johnson County and especially in the unincorporated area. And so I took that feedback, and I think you remember the discussion we had last time. There was a challenge whether or not the amendment was statutorily acceptable in the state of Kansas. I then sought out to hire Harrison Kelley to represent this amendment. And I know the charter also hired the Folsom firm as well. Based on your feedback, I took that feedback to Harris Kelley, and bottom line, we talked about, what was we really trying to accomplish. And so if we go to, if we back up there, I just want to make sure we recognize all the people that we talked to. So we talked charter members, development, planning and development commission, Johnson County elected trustees, current commissioners, former commissioner chair, neighboring county commissions and staff, members of the unincorporated community, and of course the law firms. So if we could advance to the next slide. So here's some of the great feedback that we got. Bottom line is everyone stated that they felt there was a lack of funding in the unincorporated area that needs resolved. The question is, how do you go about it? Is the elected county trustee the right model for that? And then is the election of an unincorporated trustee in line with state statute? So we've got the law firms working on that piece. And can we leverage the existing elected township trustees? That was a question, quite frankly, hadn't contemplated, hadn't considered, and I thought was an excellent question we had to get to the bottom to. So both legal staff within the county as well as Kelsey Harris law firm worked on that piece of it. Where will you get the funds? That was a great question that one of the commissioners asked. How do we go about funding this? How do you ensure the funds, once they get allocated, actually get spent in the unincorporated area? That was an excellent question. What dollar amount is the right amount? Great question as well. And so we're working on that answer. And how will we fund the allocation the allocation and the management of the work? All right. So that's what led me to, the next slide. Based on all this feedback and getting the information back from the legal teams, the answer came back that direct funding and decision-making authority should go back to the unincorporated area through the use of existing elected township trustees. So what I come to learn is the township trustees actually used to do this. And back in 1971, there was a resolution that was passed by then the three county commissioners that pulled that responsibility at the county level. And at that point in time, the elected trustees had, I believe, 90 days of which they needed to collect 10% of the members of the community's names in order to challenge that decision. That didn't occur, so that's where the consolidation of the public works into Johnson County actually occurred. So that was very educational for me, and went into what we put together in this revised amendment that we put forth. So I want to make note that this is still in draft form. This was a discussion amongst the two law firms that took place Friday, and which they gave us direction that they thought that was a workable solution. We haven't got the final readout yet, as you know, but from that, we spent the weekend putting together this revised draft. Monday morning, we were able to get this back to the Folston firm to evaluate it, and we're pending that evaluation. So I guess first and foremost, I want you to know that we haven't been sitting on this. There's been a tremendous amount of work and time being spent on this. We're just trying to get to, the best possible solution and the right answers as possible. So if we go to the next one. So what I'm going to do is read through what we believe the draft of the revision would be, and I want everyone to understand that there's a lot of people still working on this. So we've reached out to 3 of the trustees of the 7 already. We've got phone calls out to 2 more, and we're trying to get the phone number for the 7th. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands everything's still in the works here. I'm sorry? No, I meant trustees, the township trustees. So we've got incorporated the 3 that we've spoke to. We've actually incorporated some very good questions and ideas from them as well into how would this actually work. And so I'll walk through that now. So as of 12/22, the description of the proposed amendment mandating Johnson County Planning and Zoning Commission with the advice and consent of the township trustees spend certain monies from the general fund reserves of public work funds of Johnson County, Kansas on the maintenance, upkeep, roads, bridges, culverts, and other capital improvements in the unincorporated areas of Johnson County. Purpose and the reason, as I've already mentioned, that Johnson County is 40% of the land mass, unincorporated area represents 40% of the land mass, but yet only 10% of the residents. So as you can see, they're quite a disadvantage when it comes to voting. In fact, there's only, as I mentioned, there's only districts 3 and 6 that have the unincorporated constituents in their area. And as a result, the poor road conditions, the lack of proper right-of-way maintenance, and limited no capital infrastructure improvements for paved roads, replaced bridges, culverts, and lack of roadway development to properly support the intermodal that we've got in the southwestern part of the county. So if we can go to the next slide. So the proposed amendment will utilize the existing elected officials and provide a reallocation of certain money from the general fund and capital budgets for employees, contractors, facilities, equipment, supporting staff, et cetera, to the maintenance and upkeep of road, bridges, culverts, and overall improvements in the unincorporated Johnson County, Kansas area. More specifically, the amendment will state that beginning in fiscal year 2023, the Johnson County Commission shall spend an amount equal to at least XX% in the overall monies in XXX fund possessed by Johnson County annually for the capital improvements in the unincorporated areas of Johnson County, maintaining existing proposed approved public works budgets adjusted annually for inflation for the maintenance of the unincorporated area. The percentage shall adjust every 5 years to align with the percent reduction of unincorporated road miles. Additionally, there shall be the one-time following expenditures in the first 5 fiscal years to bring the unincorporated area up to infrastructure standards. So I have those dollars put in there. Now, note the ones that are in red. This is what a lot of people are working on right now. I'm not suggesting these are the right numbers. These are placeholders for now. So, Commissioner Allenbrand, I know she's reached out to Chair Eilert. We've got a call into Public Works. We're trying to get as much information to figure out what's the right number and what would be the most appropriate way to fund this. My expectation is we'll reach out to some of you as well, such as Mayor Roberts and some other commissioners, because I want to make sure we have everybody's understanding. I don't want any one particular person speaking on behalf of another, because I'm sure if you're a mayor of a city, you may look at something differently than if you're an unincorporated citizen, or any other business within the county. So if we go to the next slide. So this slide here really addresses what the feedback I got from the elected trustees was. How? All right, so I agree with you. I understand the needs. We fully support the money coming to, but how will this work? And so talking through it with them, what we arrived at is the elected township trustee shall perform the following roles and responsibilities. First and foremost, once those funds are determined and they're allocated out, and we're trying to figure out what's the magic formula of that, whether that's number of unincorporated road miles, whether it's the number of population within the individual township, maybe it's a hybrid of both. But bottom line is, once we figure out those dollars, then we'd allocate them out to the individual elected trustee. And then it would be that elected trustee and the other two trustees that reside on his board his or her board would decide how they would prioritize that spending. For instance, they may want to elect to chip and seal the roads. There may be a bridge in their area that's a safety hazard that they want to allocate funds there. There may be a bigger need in one township than another that the township trustees will want to get together and parse money differently than what we already allocated. Bottom line is, they are in a position to control their own destiny in terms of taking care of the citizens within their township.
Randy, you're about 12 minutes, so.
Okay. And then once they determine that, then they would sign off on the unincorporated infrastructure. So let's say if there's going to do a bridge, they would have the opportunity to sign off on RFQs, RFPs, and contract awards within their township for optimal use of funds. The idea is continue to leverage the existing infrastructure and processes and people we have in place. So utilize the Public Works Department as an example. There's existing processes there that we capitalize on. And then we perform an annual assessment of the Public Works Department operation cost performance and provide readout to the planning and development led annual review to include any recommended improvement and changes that would be necessary. And then they would provide advice consent of all allocations of expense and capital funds for their area. And now, this is something that was another idea from another commissioner here. And that was, we need to incorporate the planning and development team. Specifically, Jay Lipsy is the head of the planning and development organization. What we'd like Jay to do is lead a collaborative effort that would be inclusive of the township trustees with the unincorporated citizens, Public Works, county finance, county commissioners, and the Planning Development Commission, with the responsibility of putting forth a recommendation to the county commissioners for final approval. The county commissioners therefore shall not unreasonably withhold approval of the recommendation put forth unless they see, an obvious error or an issue as it becomes to the charter or state statute. And then finally, if you look at the departments that would be impacted, the planning, development, the zoning departments, and public works. So all in all, with your great ideas, we were able to approach this from a different way that achieves the objective of getting funds and investment back out in the unincorporated area, leveraging the existing model that we have here today, not superseding the county commissioner's authority, but also making sure we're recognizing the fiscal authority that our existing township trustees have, and managing the dollars being spent within their area. And then at the same time, having a collaborative effort, taking your planning and development staff, bringing them all together, and coming to a consensus, not just for the current year, not just for the next year, but we want to see them have like a 5-year plan that everybody can work together to try to ensure, the whole county is moving in the right direction. So again, I want to thank everybody for their help. There's still a lot of work to do. If we go to the next slide, please. We talked about where we're at. Here we are on the 22nd, providing the charter. What we want to do is continue to receive feedback from the remaining commissioners and township trustees, finalize the funding approach. So again, some of you are already engaged, and I'll be reaching out to more of you to help with that component of it. And January 10th, we're targeting to finalize the amendment and present to the charter for the final vote. So I guess more than anything, I want you to have an appreciation for the effort that people put forth in this, and in the fact that we're not dragging our feet. This is a lot. I mean, this is meaningful. And so we're trying to do the best job we can to present something that when it's voted on, we can actually implement it successfully. So at this point in time, Chairman, I'd like to open it up for any questions that may have.
Questions or discussions, Mayor Schwak?
A planning process which is both continuous and collaborative. That is always the key to good planning. But let me ask for clarification about this. Your very last slide gets to the heart of the issue, and that is, are you really talking about the Johnson County Planning and Zoning Commission, which under state law has no authority to budget and allocate county funds? Or are you talking about the Board of County Commissioners exercising their existing authority, but just adding to that perhaps a recommendation that they follow this continuous and collaborative planning process, which clearly you've identified a need for?
That's a great question. And to answer your question, the planning and zoning team does this for many other departments as well. Stormwater is an example. They will bring forth a proposal, their plan, they present to the Planning and Development Commission, and we provide a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for them to finalize the vote. This is very in line with what we were expecting with the county trustees. The only difference is the county trustees do have fiscal responsibility. So they're presenting a plan on how they would want to spend their allocated funds, but ultimately it does go up to the county commissioners for final sign off.
I might ask a follow-up question. So is it your intent to withdraw the language you've submitted to us today and substitute new language, in which case we really couldn't vote today?
Well, we will not be voting today on this in any event.
Okay,
But
thank you for that
The hope to
clarification.
vote is on January 10th. And as we've done with some other amendments that have been revised between second reading and presentation, a couple will vote on it. We'll have additional discussion, even though typically after second reading, I didn't anticipate additional discussion. But if there have been amendments or revisions, we'll discuss those. So yeah, if there are more revisions than this, then we will just have some shortened discussion about that on January 10th, would be my plan. Yes. Turn mic on, just a minute, Laura.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Sorry, I must not have had it up close enough.
As commissioners, let's identify ourselves as we
Okay.
start.
Laura Klinging Smith. So in the legal brief that we received, it states that there does not appear any statutory authority for the commission to create this new officer. Is that correct?
I
Or is
think-
that an opinion?
And I guess, Randy, maybe you can explain, in your first position, you had an elected trustee that would be voted on only by the unincorporated citizens. And that person was going to exercise the power to expend funds, make decisions, et cetera. Now you've limited it to the township trustees in conjunction with the Planning and Zoning Commission?
And that's what the revision
No. So
that draft
there-
revision.
There's
that
no
says-
new position to be elected, which is what, maybe, I'm sorry, I should explain. The legal opinion on the first proposal, which was to elect a trustee just elected by people that live in the unincorporated part of the county. The Fulton Seacon firm raised two serious questions about that, both constitutional and statutory, as to whether or not you could delegate those powers and whether or not that number of people in the county could utilize funds and tax funds from everybody else in the county. Again, the Fulton Seacon firm has not been asked to review Randy's newest position. And one of the first things I want to ask the commission is whether or not you want us, if you believe this is worthy, again, of moving forward, to expend more taxpayer money on the legal opinion, they can review the new revised amendment that Randy is proposing.
So at the first reading, I had mentioned there's 20 elected officers in the township. So are they now the trustee or are they? Sorry, what happens to those 21 elected positions?
Those 21 are the ones that are going to be responsible for the funds now. So state statute says they have fiscal authority within the state. And so that's why the two law firms thought this would be a better route to go, is to have those funds allocated back out to the townships, to the currently elected trustees.
So basically revise that 1971 decision?
I would say yes.
I want to make it clear, Randy, the second law firm has not made any conclusions or any recommendations. Your law firm may have suggested to you this is a better way to go to allocate it to the power to the trustees of the townships. Folston Seacon, our attorney, has not rendered any opinion.
And then the other question I have is actually two questions on this really. So does this person have to be a resident, like physically live in the unincorporated area, or can they be a landowner and live in the city?
Again, since this is focused more on the elected trustees, whatever the rules abiding for the elected trustee, is my expectation that they would follow one and the same.
And then, of course, the funding, how's this going to affect taxes? We're going to have an increase in our property tax, or are you going to allocate it from part of the other county? Where are you going to come up with the 20 million out of 10% of the population?
Excellent question. And I think that's what we're working on. It's our expectation. It's not an increase in taxes. Perhaps just simply a reallocation of the current tax money to make sure that the unincorporated folks are receiving some benefit of some capital and expenditures.
I'm having trouble with this. Then my final thought is, in Aubrey Township, they're responsible for the tornado sirens, the school guard, the crossing guard. This is mostly all about roads and bridges. What happens to those expenses and those responsibilities? Are they going to be included? I don't know about any of the other townships, but I know in Aubrey Township, they're responsible for those.
Great question. My expectation is this will simply augment to their existing roles and responsibilities. It would not supersede anything.
Mayor Michelson?
I have two questions, Randy. Thanks for your presentation. First one is, well, maybe this is more of a suggestion, but you can comment on it. If you are going to reallocate $20 million without raising taxes, I think it would be prudent to identify where that is coming from. I assume that's forthcoming, but
That's true.
okay.
Yes.
And then the question is, the township trustees, do they cover 100% of the unincorporated area of Johnson County, or are there some unincorporated areas of Johnson County that are not within a township that has an?
It is my understanding that all the unincorporated citizens are in fact incorporated in those 7 townships that have been identified.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Peterson, and I'm going to get to you on Zoom. If you're a charter commissioner, I know that Zach Thomas and Leslie Rivarola have comments or questions.
Randy, if this proposal goes forward and the money is allocated, then who oversees the work? Who does the work? Who oversees it to make sure it's completed?
Great question. Our expectation is it's business as usual today, other than the fact that the townships will be picking and choosing the priorities in which the money gets spent. So if Public Works and Brian Peating's organization is facilitating that process today, then our expectation is he will continue to do that tomorrow and in the future in this model. The only difference in that is that with the fiscal responsibility, as you would expect, they're going to make sure they understand the RFQs, the RFPs that are going out, make sure that they're targeted for, optimal benefit of the community, and make sure they're done, efficiently. So that would be the only change in the roles and responsibilities that I see.
I'm going to go ahead and go to Zach Thomas on Zoom. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't really have a question. I just want to applaud Mr. Hutchins on the work and effort he's done on this. He's clearly spent quite a bit of time on working on this area, and it's something he cares passionately about. Having spent a decent amount of time in the unincorporated portions, it's noticeable the difference. And it's noticeable that something needs to be done to change that. And I applaud Randy for taking this on. And I hope there's something that through the legal partnerships we may have that will allow this commission to make this charter commission to make a pledge forward moving forward for those unincorporated areas. So thank you, Randy, for your presentation.
Well, thank you, Zach.
Leslie Riverola.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question, and Mr. Hutchins, I know that you included in your presentation the percent of land mass that is included in the unincorporated area, as well as the percentage of voters. But what I didn't hear you provide was the percentage of tax base or the amount of tax base that is included in the unincorporated area as compared to that which is incorporated. And I, like the other commissioners that have asked, would be very interested to know where your funding source is coming from. And I think that is a really critical piece of information before this is ready to move forward.
Okay, thank you for the question. The percentages that I came up with were out of the presentations that were put forth. So the 40% come from the Public Works and the 10% was on another presentation. I can't recall which one it was. As in terms of the percentages of revenue that come from the unincorporated area, if you recall the discussion we had the first time, it was an excellent question. How would you fund it, given the fact that there are in fact lower sources of revenue come from the unincorporated area? And the discussion was as businesses come into the unincorporated area and would start driving revenue, the next step is the cities annex that. So the point is that there will always be a deficiency in revenue in the unincorporated area simply because of the fact that the cities go ahead and annex those revenue streams into the city. So I don't know the percentages, but obviously there's not going to be funds that would solely come from the unincorporated area to fund the unincorporated area simply because the industry gets annexed into the cities.
Mayor Boehm, and then Mayor Roberts.
Mike Boehm, thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy, appreciate the presentation. As we've talked before, when a city annexes ground into a city from the county and incorporated areas, a new tax is assessed against those properties at the city level. The county continues to remains to get the county tax that's assessed on those properties. So annexation doesn't change the amount of money going into the county coffers at that time. And I think everyone needs to be clear about that. A new assessment is created with the city, but the county revenue continues to go at the county rate and flow where it used to the county. It's not one or the other. Two, do trustees have the ability to raise taxes?
That is not the expectation.
I didn't ask that question. Do they have the ability to do it?
I think what they have is the ability to put something on the ballot. I know in our township, there was a levy that was introduced to take care of an abandoned cemetery, of which it passed. So to answer your question, that's what I know about it. but it would have to be somebody that's more familiar with the township policy than I to be able to answer that question.
And I'd love to have that answer before I take any final action on this. It concerns me that we're going to have a planning and zoning commission be tasked with raising money, and the amount is certain monies. I don't know what it is, but there was $65 million put on the board for the first 5 years, not accounting any ongoing and beyond that. Those are some significant numbers. It puts those of us living in cities at an unfair advantage if we maintain city roads in the incorporated areas using our city tax dollars. Roads of countywide significance, such as Lackman or Flum, that go from one end of the county or the other, are available for county funding through the CARS program. It's not funded through property tax, though. And we have to compete with everybody else in the county for those road projects to get that money. To simply allocate more money out of the county-wide pot to serve a minority number of citizens is a tax increase, or at least a tax transfer from rural areas to the city citizens who are paying for our roads on top of that. I think you've eliminated the concern about the one man, one vote unequal representation that was unconstitutional. I think you've opened up more cans of worms here that I, representing an corporate area, would be concerned, because all of a sudden, if we go down this path, then city of Overland Park and Lenexa, or city of Shawnee and Mission could get together and want their special allocation. I don't believe this belongs in the county charter. I think the county has an obligation to main roads to a certain standard and for safety in unincorporated areas like all other counties do. But I'm not sure they need to be held out for a designated figure or transfer of funds, wealth, what have you, from incorporated areas to the rural areas. Decisions were made to live in the unincorporated area with roads that don't match those incorporated areas.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments and honestly love your feedback as I reached out to you. What's the fair way in order to fund this, right? But I'll just give you an example. All right. Today, Miami County has more dollars in their capital spend in the unincorporated area than Johnson County, Kansas, one of the richest counties in the nation. So when we talk about raising taxes in the city, my question becomes, where have been the dollars in the unincorporated to begin with? So that's been the whole challenge, right? So the dollars have in fact been going to the municipalities and not in the unincorporated area. What we're simply saying is give our fair share, get us caught back up to the standards of which the people in the incorporated areas live within.
Mayor Roberts?
Hey, Randy, I'd like to first thank you for all your work on this. And as you know, I voted no on this before because I had concerns. I'm actually more in favor of this because I believe a township board acts very similar to a council and mayor form of government. But it's the local government closest to the people. And so McCamish Township may want things different as far as roads go, or may be willing to support certain projects that Aubrey Township would not, or vice versa. And so I'm curious to see what the outcome of this really looks like. So I'm in support today to see this come back and see what it looks like. So I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Brenda Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question, I do appreciate what Randy has done, and he's brought up some really important issues. My question, just thinking this through to the end, is what is the actual language on a ballot look like? There are so many layers to this proposal that it's difficult for me to ferret out what exactly the proposed solution is here, but it is a detailed process. I get that. I have a concern, and I'm not sure how to get around it, really, is about putting specific years and percentages and dollar references into a document that is essentially a very high level 30,000 foot constitutional document. And so that's kind of one concern about how that plays out over the long haul, 10 and 20 years from now. And then second, how this works if, for instance, if you kind of flip this around to the older neighborhoods in our county that might also argue that they have significantly been underinvested in, if you will, relative to newer parts of the county. Would then in future charter processes, they be able to lobby for similar specific allocations of funding from the county budget to particular areas or districts? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit here and see this in a 10 and 20-year perspective.
Okay, Brenda, thank you. I think, first of all, we want your input. As we said, it's in red for a reason. We don't know the right numbers. We don't know the right percentages. There's people working on that. Mayor Boehm, I'm hoping you provide some input. And to your question, you know, in the end of the day, we want it to be fair. And I guess the years in terms of investment, what we're looking for is what is that investment dollar number that we need to get it up to satisfactory standards, right? And if that's 20 million overall, then it's 20 million overall. If it's 50 million, then it's 50 million. But what we're not doing is we're not saying that every year there's going to be a spend. This is considered a 1-year fiscal spend in the years that we have right here. So we'll figure out what the right numbers are. We've got people, smart people working on that, and hopefully you guys will help us as well. In terms of future charters, I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, if there's a deficiency in the county, by all means, I hope they take an initiative like I and you and everyone else in this room to call it out. What is it? And then bring it amongst your peers. And if the peers agree, then fantastic. And that's all I'm doing here today is we identified a blind spot in the county. I mean, overall, the county operates fantastic, right? But there is a blind spot and needs addressed. And this is the best vehicle we have right now to address it.
We're at about 1 hour. Are there other comments? Understanding this is a second reading. I'm comfortable that we're going to have more discussion on this before we would vote on January 10th. I do have a question about whether this commission believes it would like a legal opinion from Folston Siefken on the revised proposal presented by Randy today, because we have not asked them to do that at this point because they didn't have this proposal until Monday of this week. That will require additional taxpayer funds. The county commission authorized up to, I think, 7,500, 7,000, and will not meet again until January sometime. If we exceed that, I'm confident that Folston Siefken will do the work if they need to and come back to the commission if they need more funds. But we've asked them to look at 4 things so far. This would be a 5th thing. So I'm open to discussion about whether we want to move that forward and get that decided pretty quickly. Commissioner Peterson?
Has Cindy Dunham had a chance to review this, and does she have an?
And Cindy Dunham is the attorney for the Board of County Commissioners, the Johnson County. She's not the commission's attorney. We have utilized her expertise because she knows Kansas statutes, and so we have often received guidance from Cindy.
And thank you for that clarification. I just received this also, so I've not had a chance to do any kind of in-depth review of it. So I think I had some of the same questions that have already been asked from a more of a legal standpoint, of course. But so at this time, I don't have observations I'm ready to share.
Mayor Michelson.
Chairman, it occurs to me this is a relatively complex proposal, and the potential cost to the taxpayers of us putting something on the ballot that may be contrary to state law would dwarf very quickly in litigation or otherwise the cost of investing in an additional legal opinion on the second version of this. So I would suggest we go ahead and do that.
Without objection, then I will instruct Folston Siefken to review this proposal for compliance with Kansas Constitution, Kansas statute. That means we will proceed forward to a vote, hopefully a vote on January 10th with some more discussion and with the legal opinion. Does anybody else have any comments before I make mine? Try to save mine to the end. Randy, you worked hard on this. You represent the unincorporated part of the county. You know what the conditions are there better than I do. But we're talking about the Constitution of Johnson County. And this level of specificity, this level of detail, as ambiguous as it is a level of detail that is a policy decision. And I believe the policy decisions about how money raised in this county from county taxpayers should be spent throughout the county is made by our elected Board of County Commissioners. And my dad was a township trustee in rural Kansas, and we went to the meetings twice a year. I remember they had tax levy authority. They worried about road grading. This is a much bigger deal than that. I don't know what the numbers are, but $65 million, and I know you aren't sure those are the right numbers, but I think Mayor Bain, 40% of the geographic part of the county, but 10% of the population will receive, and to me, an amount of money that is not justified by the amount of traffic on those. The way we allocate dollars for roads and bridges is where the traffic is, partly where it brings the tax base, so that we raise taxes on our property taxes that go for the city, the county, the school district, the community college, the library. And so when we get to this on second reading, I will not be able to support it. Townships raised their own mill levy before 1971, and they took care of their roads from their own mill levy for any township roads. They got rid of that in 1971, so the county would be responsible for it. But taking 40% of the CARS money generated by sales taxes in cities and giving it to the unincorporated part of the county is taxation without representation, in my view. So again, I think this is delegating powers that should not be delegated. I think ultimately the legal opinion will be they cannot be delegated, but I want to leave these policy decisions to our Board of County Commissioners as they are elected to make those decisions. So we will ask for a legal opinion. Randy will continue to polish his presentation, and we'll be back to that on January 10th. Typically, we've had a break at 5 o'clock. I'm going to plow right through it. If it's okay with everybody, we'll move to the second reading, which is Mayor Michelson's fifth-year chair. We don't have a legal opinion on this yet, but Mayor Michelson, you have the floor. 1 second, Mike. Very well. Oh, Deputy Clerk Sater will read the proposal.
As section 2.02, the fourth sentence shall be deleted and replaced with the following. 6 commissioners shall continue to be elected to 4-year terms consistent with past practice. The 7th district commissioner, elected in November 2022, shall be elected to a 5-year term, after which term the 7th district commissioner shall thereafter be elected to 4-year terms beginning in November 2027.
And the 7th district commissioner is the at-large chair. I'm not sure why they called it a district, but that district is the full county. So, Eric?
Thank you, Chair. So under the theory of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, this proposal got unanimous approval at the last reading. So this is the same version, commissioners, that you saw at the first reading of this. It just lot changes. I just wanted to point out this one has not. The purpose of this arises because there is, and I believe this is beyond dispute, a structural imbalance in the current county chair, which has a current structure of having that 7th district commissioner, the chair, if you will, elected at the same time as 3 commissioners are elected, which means that those 3 commissioners in those 3 districts forever and in perpetuity are barred from running for chair while keeping their commission seats. Those 3 districts are District 1, 4, and 5. Conversely, the commissioners in the other 3 seats, and more importantly, the residents represented by those other 3 districts, are allowed to run for chair while keeping their commission seats because of the timing of it. Those would be districts 2, 3, and 6. So that is a manifest structural imbalance and unfairness, skewing in favor of some residents at the expense of others, that could be easily fixed, in my view, by moving the chair election to an odd year. And the suggested method of doing that is to make this next one, which would be elected in November 2022, would then be elected to a 5-year term, starting at the beginning of 2023, after which that chair would return to 4-year terms as it currently sits, just to get on the odd year and stay on the odd year. All the elections and the timing of the elections of the 6 regular district seats would remain the same. So that's really all I had. As far as the legal opinion goes, I did have a conversation, both Cynthia and Mr. Rupp at Fulton and I sort of identified different Kansas statutes that mention even year elections, and there are several. We'll hear Fulton's opinion. I've listened very carefully and read those very carefully, and there's nothing in any of those Constitution that would prohibit this, in my view, certainly not explicitly. And to the extent we can go through those, to the extent there's explicit guidance from the Kansas legislature, and there is, very specifically, it grants this charter commission the authority to set both the term and the manner of election of commissioners. So I think we're going to be okay there, but obviously we'll wait and hear what the independent council says. So I think this comes down to a policy decision. The one thing I've heard, just sort of put it out there, is some people prefer having the chair at a larger election for turnout, which I get, but I also see a policy reason why, you might want it on the same election as the smaller races, so that you get the voters who are focused and informed about that race, as opposed to people just there for a higher race and checking boxes down the line. In any event, the voters will still be able to decide. Anybody who wants to vote can vote. That's the point. I mean, you can argue the policy on that. The point for me is not so much that I favor one of those, that we not have built-in structural imbalance and unfairness in our county charter, which, as you point out, is really the constitution of the county. That's all I got. Thanks. Comments or questions? Comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Rattan?
You voiced this, the concern that I have is about voter turnout, that this may have a lower voter turnout for such an important position.
Learned at that, Eric, do we have numbers? Because the chair is elected in a presidential year currently. It'll be up in 2022. No, it'd be in the off year. The off year. Okay. So off year November election versus the odd year elections. We can get that. We can get those numbers. I'd be interested in seeing those, because my concern is the part about turnout, and our odd years, as we just went through this year, was, I guess we got up to 25% countywide, I think, which was higher than normal. In even number years, I think we're closer to 50, and in presidential years, we're closer to 60 or 70. But that's my big concern with this, is that we reduce turnout. But Mayor Boehm?
Mike Boehm. Appreciate the thoughts here. In my opinion, the county chair is elected at large. They represent anyone. If has to give up their seat, someone else will fill that seat. So the representation in the individual districts will remain the same, one at large and one in the district. So they're not giving up representation. They may have to an individual may have to give up their seat to run for that position, but the representation does not change. This is the most important position that we elect in Johnson County, in my opinion. It's one. It's not one of how many House members do we have now and senators that we had that we send to Topeka? 10 and 17, 18 that have pieces of the county that they represent. This is one person. If you go back and look historically at elections for cities, which would be in the off year, which is this, where you're proposing to move this. The last few years, we've had some contested races. We've had school board races and things of that nature that has driven turnout it still is minuscule by comparison to the elections when we have at least the House up, if not the House and the Senate up in some years. So I just think that we're diminishing the importance of this role. This role, I think, over time will evolve into a much bigger role as spokesman for the county. And I think that needs to have as much input from as many voters as possible. To me, that outweighs whether certain individuals have to give up their seat to run or not.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the overriding concern, I'm not sure why we or the original commission wouldn't have put this on a presidential year election. So I'm not really sure that's our goal here. I think our goal here, to pick which election, is going to be best. Again, I would suggest with 25% turnout, which is not minuscule. It's everybody who wanted to show up, and that's not far from where the other elections are. Are those people focused on this election, who are informed about this election, who care enough to vote in this election? So you might actually you could argue that that's going to be a better outcome for this race. You're right, that Mayor Boehm, that there will still be somebody able to fill that seat, but what you will be depriving those residents of is the chance to have the seniority and the continuity of the same person who may well be the person that the voters want in that seat if they don't make chair. And that's probably the most likely incumbent choice of voters, and you're going to deprive them for 3 districts and not the other 3 in perpetuity.
Other comments or questions in the room? And then we'll ask anybody on Zoom. Again, this will not be voted on tonight. It will be voted on January 10th. We'll have a legal opinion by then, and we'll have time to discuss that legal opinion, how it applies to this. Anybody on Zoom, Linda? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the third item on second reading, which is the regulations applicable to the district attorney and the sheriff. There is already some language in the charter for that, and Mayor Schwach, you had a proposal to add some additional language. So Linda will read the proposed amendment.
This was the last proposed amendment that I had received on this topic. Modify Article 5 as follows. 1, modify Section 5.02, Bullet 1, Sentence 2 to read as follows. Except as provided by law or this charter, the county manager shall appoint, suspend, or dismiss all non-elected department directors and division heads, including the county clerk, the register of deeds, and the county treasurer. The statutory duties of the county clerk shall be performed by, or as necessary, consolidated under the authority of, and as delegated and assigned by the county manager. The statutory duties of the register of deeds shall be performed by the county clerk, or as necessary, consolidated under the authority of, and delegated and assigned by the county manager. The statutory duties of the county treasurer shall be performed by, or as necessary, consolidated under the authority of, and as delegated and assigned by the county manager. Number 2, modify Section 5.05 by deleting bullets 1, 2, 3, and redraft the remaining provisions. Subject to read as follows. Sheriff shall be elected, subject to amendments as provided or allowed by law. The commissioners shall review and approve the sheriff's budget. The sheriff's office is subject to the personnel policies and procedures established by the BOCC and all other administrative policies adopted by the commission to the extent not inconsistent with law. While the district attorney of the 10th Judicial District is not a county official, this elected state position shall comply with the administrative policies adopted by the commission to the extent not inconsistent with law.
Mayor Schwach, yeah, I know we talked about some changes to that original proposal, including those first 3 bullet points being moved up moved up into 5.02 with the 3 previous elected positions. But the floor is yours to explain this, and then we'll have questions and comments. Again, we are not voting on this tonight.
Thank you, Chairman Musel. Let me start by indicating that section 502 is titled Appointed Positions. Section 505 deals exclusively with elected positions. But as it stands right now, there are at least 3 appointed positions which are described in that part of the charter that is supposed to only be dealing with elected positions. So what this does is clean that up and move the appointed positions to the section that is entitled appointed position and leaves in the section elected positions just those positions other than the Board of County Commissioners themselves that are elected. So I am not changing any meaning. I'm not adding language. I am simply moving it around, and that's language that's in the existing charter. The next thing that we are doing when we get to additional language related to the sheriff, there is some language there that is not in the current charter, but that appears in state law right now. And the reason I believe that we need to clearly state that language in the charter is all the public comments that many of you have provided and that others have provided. Some people said that they were afraid and believed it to be a conflict for the county commissioners to review and approve the budget of the sheriff. But the state law requires that the Board of County Commissioners do that. So that would just make it plain by stating what is in state law in the charter so that all of us have the same understanding of what the law is. Same thing with regard to the personnel policies. The state law says that the sheriff's office will abide by the personnel policies and the pay system that the Board of County Commissioners adopts. So it's not one of us on this commission providing a limitation on the sheriff. It is simply making clear what the law actually is. Now, had we received no comments, had we not had enormous outpouring of concern, some of which was misdirected because people didn't understand what the state statute is. And I don't blame people for not understanding that. If I weren't a lawyer, I would never have bothered to look at the state statute. I would have looked at the charter and said, okay, this is what we can and can't do. So I'm just trying to get to clarity and full transparency by having the charter, 1, appropriately organized, and 2, to reflect what state law is. I think it will clear up misperception, and therefore I've asked that the charter be amended to reflect that.
Questions or comments for Commissioner Schwab? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand the purpose of this at all. It's already in state statute. There's no need to repeat it. It's
I doubt that it will do any good, but we'll get through this faster, as I said. I think we all know why you're here. So the cheering and hollering probably doesn't add much to it. Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
I understand your comment. I don't believe it requires a response.
Could you hold the mic up, please? I can't hear you.
I said I understood your comment. I don't believe it requires additional response or discussion, though. It's one opinion versus another.
Please, this is discussion among the commission. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
So basically what you're telling me is you're not going to answer that question.
I'm sorry, you didn't pose a question. You
What's the
stated an
purpose? It's
opinion
already in state law. Why does it have to be repeated in the charter? It's
because
duplicative. It serves no purpose.
the purpose I believe that it serves is clarity. Clearly, based on the written comments this body received, the public does not understand the balance of authority between the Board of County Commissioners and the sheriff.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's let her speak as we've let everybody speak. That would be polite and appropriate. Mayor Schwak?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that the mayor understands the statute. It specifically talks about personnel actions. It's not about following county policy on this, that, or the other thing. It's personnel actions, hiring, firing, demotion, promotion, disciplinary action. That's what it covers.
I believe that's too narrow a reading of the statute. And no one is disputing that the sheriff has the right to hire and fire. It is a question of how he goes about that and what he pays.
I would note, we do have a legal opinion on this that indicates the ambiguity, I think, in the interplay between the statutes, but also notes that this appears to be duplicative with what's in the charter now. So I think we do have a policy issue. We're not going to get any more clarity on the legal issue. When we get to this on January 10th to vote on it, we'll be voting on it based on whether or not we think that it makes sense to have the language in the charter that's also in the statutes, and to some extent, whether you believe that the charter is attempting to take something away from the statute. Is that fair summary? Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Boehm.
Mayor Boehm and then Commissioner Rattan.
I've stated this before on a number of times. I don't think the charter is broken. However, there are certain things that are being proposed that are cleanup in nature. If this comes to me as the first thing I vote on, I'll probably vote no. If it comes to me at the last thing, when I know there are other things that are due to the electorate for consider, I may have a different opinion of this. So I think at some point, the balancing of what are the important issues and what are the cleanup issues, and I think this one's cleanup in nature. The order it's received will influence my vote, because I don't want to go to the public for votes and spend the money on things that are cleanup in nature.
I tell you, based on the order of what we have now, with 4 votes tonight and then the 3 things today, or on January 10th, this would be the last item voted on. So I don't know if that, and we have all agreed, for those in the audience, that there are some things in the charter that need to be cleaned up, because it was presented to the voters in 2000 with anticipatory things about what we might do if it's adopted. Well, we know it's adopted, so there's some things we could clean up, and we've agreed to save any purely clerical administrative amendments to the end to see if there's anything else on the ballot. I think the sense of this group was, we're not going to put cleanup amendments on the ballot if there's nothing substantive on the ballot. So I think that's what Mayor Bain was referring to. Mr. Rattan.
I wanted to ask Mari or Cynthia if there are any other parts in our charter that have some duplications with state statute.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Tant, what was state statutes?
The comment was, is there's duplication between, why rewrite it if it's already in state statute? And I was asking, are there any other instances between our charter and state statute where there are some duplications? And if there are, or is there a reason, do you know the reasoning why we would restate something or duplicate it between the charter and the state statute?
And I'll look to Maury too. Both the district attorney and the sheriff sections of the charter do restate in some ways what's already in statute. And I don't know why I assume it was purpose in 1999 and 2000 that was included. I'm trying to think of anything off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Nothing comes to mind immediately, but I haven't reviewed it page by page with that in mind.
Questions or comments? Yeah, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think this amendment is unnecessary. I think it's going to add more confusion to something that is a hot spot in general. The county commission and the sheriff know exactly what personnel policies need to be followed. If something isn't being followed, the county commission needs to step up and do their job. This is not helping anything. It's just going to add more confusion. And the sheriff's office is regulated almost entirely by state statute, and everything the sheriff does. We're pinpointing on something that some folks disagree what the sheriff did, but the county commission needs to step up and do their job. This is just adding some confusion that we will regret later on. So obviously I won't be supporting it. I think it should be withdrawn. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from the commission? I don't believe we have any from Zoom. My comments would be, I appreciate the intent to clarify. I don't think it clarifies. I think it duplicates what's already in state statute. I think it also duplicates what's already in the charter, which says today, the offices of the elected county sheriff and district attorney shall comply with administrative policies adopted by the commission, the Board of County Commission, to the extent not inconsistent with law. So I think it's already in there. And I know, Mayor Schwach, as lawyers, what we know is when somebody changes the statute or the Constitution, and a court has to interpret what that change means, they have to figure out why we changed it. And they may read something in that none of us intended. And we have 20 years of this language in place that has worked with the Board of County Commissioners as our elected body, reviewing and approving the sheriff's budget and working with the sheriff to the extent the statutory interplay is there. So when we get to a vote on this, I will vote no. We're now through all of the second readings for tonight. We're ready for the votes. Do you have those ready to read? Okay. The first item that is ready for a vote tonight is the proposal by Commissioner Smith to fill vacancies on the Board of County Commissioners by election to be held at the next November election, basically, as long as it's not closer than 90 days when the vacancy occurs. Linda will read it, and then we will move directly into a vote.
All vacancies on the Board of County Commissioners shall be filled at the next scheduled election unless the next scheduled election is within 90 days of the position becoming vacant.
And recall that if we have 13 yes votes, this would then proceed to be recommended to the Board of County Commissioners to be placed on the ballot. And it's a recommendation that they have to follow. So it would be placed on the ballot next November. There would likely be some tweaking of any of these to make sure we have the correct ballot language.
I'd ask for a pause. I still haven't figured out the scheme of how I'm being handed paperwork. So
Okay.
I want to figure out where that is in this packet tonight.
Let's let
So I
Linda read
have
it and then we'll pause for a minute before we ask.
It's in here, right?
Yes. Yeah, page 3, top of the page. Attachment page 2.
I'm right here. Okay, thank you.
Well, let's read it. No, I did not intend. Does anybody feel like we've already moved and seconded this to go to second reading, which takes us to a vote. So I was not going to ask for another motion in seconds. I think we're going to move right into the vote. Anybody uncomfortable with that? All right. Yes.
Wendy Bingezer. That's a yes. Mike Bain. That's a no. Karen Brownlee. Yes. Vicki Charlesworth.
Vicki Charlesworth, no.
That's a no. Jim Denny.
Denning is yes.
That's a yes. Jane Dirks. That's a yes. Jimmy. Tedrick House.
No.
That's a no. Randy Hutchins.
Yes.
That's a yes. Chris Iliff is absent. Laura Clinging Smith. That's a yes. Joy Costin. That's a no. Brent McCune.
Ray McCune is a no.
That's a no. Eric Michelson. That's a no. Ed Peterson. That's a no. Don Rattan. That's a no. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola, yes.
That's a yes. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, yes.
That's a yes. Kyle Russell.
No.
That's a no. Paula Swatch. That's a no. Brenda Sharp.
Sharp, no.
That's a no. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, no.
That's a no. Greg Smith.
Yes.
That's a yes. Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas, no.
That's a no. Chairman Musel.
Chair votes no.
I've recorded 9 yeses, 14 no. It fails.
That's consistent with my count. We'll move on to the vote on the Public Health Advisory Committee. If you would read that, please.
The Board of County Commissioners shall form a standing Health and Safety Advisory Council, HSAC, that will provide strategic guidance when the BOCC acts as the Board of Health or exercises other emergency powers related to issues of public health and safety. The HSAC shall be composed of representatives from accredited health professions, colleges and universities, K through 12 school districts, local federally qualified health center, businesses, as well as professional health interest groups, as determined by the BOCC, including but not limited to physicians, patients, caregivers, pharmacies, hospitals, schools, nonprofit, and religious organizations, law enforcement, first responders, and the general public. The directors of the Health and Environment Department and Emergency Management Department shall serve as ex officio members of the HSAC. Each district commissioner of the BOCC and the county sheriff shall appoint one member to the HSAC. The chair of the county commission shall appoint 2 members to the HSAC. The HSAC may be expanded to include other disciplines as the BOCC deems appropriate. Members of the HSAC shall serve 3-year terms and are not subject to terms limits.
Everybody have this in front of them and prepared to vote? They call the roll.
Zach Thomas.
I was warned but was not prepared. I'm sorry. Zach Thomas votes no.
That's a no. Greg Smith.
No.
That's a no. Greg Shelton.
Yes.
That's a yes. Brenda Sharp.
Sharp, yes.
That's a yes. Paula Swatch. That's a yes. Kyle Russell.
Yes.
That's a yes. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, no.
That's a no. Leslie Riverola.
Sorry, took me a minute to unmute. Leslie Riverola is a no.
That's a no. Don Rattan. That's a yes. Ed Peterson. That's a yes. Eric Michelson. That's a no. Brent McCune.
Brett McCune is no.
That's a no. Joy Costin. That's a yes. Laura Clinging Smith. That's a no. I still have Chris Iliff as being absent. Randy Hutchins.
No.
That's a no. Tedrick Hausch.
No.
That's a no. Jane Dirks. That's a no. Jen Denning.
Denning is no.
That's a no. Vicki Charlesworth.
Vicki Charlesworth, no.
That's a no. Karen Brownlee. That's a no. Mike Bain. That's a no. Wendy Bingesser. Wendy Bingesser? No. That's a no.
Do I get a vote?
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not used to doing these orders. Chair Musel,
Chair votes no.
that's a no. I apologize, Chair.
That's all right.
My count is 7 yeses and 16 nos.
Thank you. We're not
Can
done
I-
with,
can
we're
I
not done with our
proceed?
business, so
Can I proceed with the meeting, please?
we're not done with our meeting yet, so
With
let's
that
move on.
count, that item fails. Thank you.
The next item for vote. The next item for vote is the Board of County Commissioners approval of department hires by the county manager or ratification. Would you read that amendment, please?
The county manager shall appoint or hire with simple majority approval of the BOCC, the non-elected director of each department whose principal officer reports to the county manager. The county manager shall also suspend or dismiss all non-elected directors except as provided by law or this charter.
Let's wait. Let's
I'm
take a
having
minute.
difficulty hearing Mr. Chair on Zoom because of the background
We're
noise.
gonna take a few minutes. If you could please leave quietly, we'll go on with the rest of the business we have. Thank you for coming. If you all could help us move them out of that other area too, out into the stairway, that way we can proceed with our meeting and everybody will be able to hear. We really can't, for at least for perception purposes under the Open Meetings Act. I suggested that and was knocked down. Yeah. Right. All right, we'll try to proceed now with everybody on Zoom. Bear with us. The folks have largely moved out of the room and are out in the hallway and hopefully quiet enough that we can hear. So Linda, would you go ahead and reread the proposal for ratification of department manager hiring?
The county manager shall appoint or hire with simple majority approval of the BOCC, the non-elected director of each department whose principal officer reports to the county manager. The county manager shall also suspend or dismiss all non-elected directors except as provided by law or this charter.
Everybody have this in front of them, comfortable with it in the room? Those of you on Zoom, if you want any pause, please just interrupt and let me know. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and vote on this proposed amendment.
Laura Klinging Smith. That's a yes. Chris Iliff, I still have absent. Randy Hutchins. That's a yes. Tedrick Hausch.
No.
That's a no. Jimmy Gaynon is absent. Jane Dirks. That's a yes. Jim Denning.
Denning, yes.
That's a yes. Vicky Charlesworth.
Vicky Charlesworth, no.
Thank you. That's a no. Karen Brownlee. That's a yes. Mike Bain. That's a no. Wendy Bingesser. That's a yes. Okay. Joy Costin. That's a no. Brent McCune.
Britt McCune is no.
No. Eric Michelson. That's a no. Ed Peterson. Ed Peterson is no. Don Rattan. That's a no. Leslie Riverola.
Riverola, no.
That's a no. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, no.
That's a no. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell, no.
That's a no. Paula Swart. That's a no. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp, no.
That's a no. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, no.
That's a no. Greg Smith.
Yes.
That's a yes. Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas, no.
That's a no. And Chair Musel.
Chair votes no.
That's a no. I have a count of 7 yeses, 16 nos, so that fails.
The last item to vote on tonight is the compensation of the Board of County Commissioners. The proponent, Commissioner Michelson, has proposed a revision, so let's let him present that and have brief discussion on that, or as much as I guess the commission wants.
Excuse me.
All right.
Each commissioner and the chair.
Which one are you reading? The revised one or the one that came from second reading? That's a revised one. Okay, she can read the revised.
Each commissioner and the chair shall be offered an annual salary set at the 2021 salary amount, adjusted annually at the lesser rate of A, 2%, B, the consumer price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, CPI-W, for the trailing 12 months, or C, the average budgeted increase percentage for all county employees. The first adjustment shall occur in January 2023 for the 2023 year. They shall be offered employee benefits commensurate with those offered to county management employees.
Okay, Eric, if you could just explain the difference. I don't want to go back into a back and forth about it, but the changes from the proposal that was at second reading.
Okay. The changes from the last reading in response to good comments from my fellow commissioners are we're setting a cap, so there's no longer an unlimited ability to raise their own pay. We're also setting a floor. The floor is now the lesser of 2%. That was changed from 4% at the last meeting, in response to Senator Denning's request. Or if it's lower than 2%, it would be the consumer price index for urban wage earners. That stays the same. But then there's a third lesser than. If the average budgeted increase percentage for all county employees is less than that, than either of those two numbers, then it would be that lesser increase that the county employees are getting. The other change, the final change, is just to delete non-cash in the description of employee benefits, because it brought to my attention that some benefits are cash, like phone and reimbursements, that type of thing, just to clarify that. Those are the changes, Chair.
Quick, short questions?
Oh, and one other one. Commissioner Smith's "and" has been changed to an "or." Yeah.
I wanted a but. No, I'm,
Which,
right.
which and is that? That would be,
the one before the small c in parentheses, it used to be and now it's or.
the or is correct. Right. Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, we're ready to vote on this one. The clerk will call the roll.
Brent McCune,
Yes.
that's a yes. Eric Michelson,
Yes.
that's a yes. Ed Peterson, that's a yes. Don Ratan, that's a yes. Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola, no.
that's a no. Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, no.
that's a no. Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, yes.
that's a yes. Paula Swak, that's a yes. Brenda Sharp,
Yes.
that's a yes. Greg Shelton,
Greg Shelton, yes.
that's a yes. Greg Smith,
No.
that's a no. Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, yes.
that's a yes. Wendy Bingezer, that's a no. Mike Boehm,
I appreciate the addition of C. I still don't believe it belongs in our Constitution. No.
that's a no. Karen Brownlee, that's a no. Vicky Charlesworth,
Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
that's a yes. Jim Denning,
Denning, no.
that's a no. Jane Dirks, that's a no. Tedrick House,
No.
that's a no. Randy Hutchins,
No.
that's a no. I still have Chris Iliff as being absent. Laura Clinging Smith, that's a no. Joy Costin, that's a yes. Chairman Musel,
Chair votes no.
that's a no. Sorry again. I have 11 yeses, 12 nos, therefore it fails.
We have completed brilliantly at 5:53 PM, all of the second readings and the votes. Please pay attention to your email between now and our January 10th meeting, because if we get any legal opinions or any other revisions or tweaks to the three items that we had second readings on tonight, they will come to you then. My anticipation is that we vote on January 10th. It will depend a little bit on what the revisions are and maybe what the legal opinions are. But please give those some items some thought. Those are the trustees, I guess, the township trustees and planning commission authority in the unincorporated part of the county. The fifth year term or year for the chair to get him on an odd numbered election. And then the regulations applicable to the district attorney and the sheriff. Our next meeting in January 10th at 4 PM will be at the KU Edwards campus in the Best Conference Center. And the one thing we've talked about, we have the authority, we've talked about recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, which are not mandated to be put on the ballot. We don't really have a strict procedure for those, but what I would ask is if you intend to turn one of these amendments that is not yet, does not make the ballot into a recommendation, that you have that ready to present at the January 10th meeting so we can consider it at the January 26th meeting. Those would simply be recommendations. Otherwise, my assumption is that we're done with proposed amendments once we vote on the 10th. And we will see if there are any items that people want to consider as recommendations, which again would require 13 votes.
Chair, is there a time that they would need to have those turned into recommendations and supplied to me so that we can have it for our agenda?
I'll bet there is. What would you like? The 10th is our Monday meeting. Could we have them in by close of business on Friday? How about noon on Friday, the 7th? Does that work for folks? January 7th, and Linda will get an email out giving you that deadline. January 7th at noon, if you want to revise one of these amendments and turn them into a recommendation. Fair enough?
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to Linda, that gives her about 4 or 5 hours on a Friday to turn those things all around. Can we give her one more day, perhaps?
So you're thinking maybe 3 p.m. on Friday, Brenda? Linda's really good.
I know I would like more time to read these things.
Okay. Close of business January 6th. I mean, we've been through this, so close of business January 6th.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for your diligence. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Rattan, seconded by Commissioner Schwach. All in favor reluctantly say yes.
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 Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you all.